The king. The king. Starring the king. The king. Starring the king. The king. Talk is cheap, motherfucker. Starring the king. Starring the king. Starring the king. Right now it's showtime. Are you ready?
Good afternoon, my Cracker Tugas. I'm MBT, and this is 20 Spirit Testing. I just got back from filming stuff with A-Drive. Expect to see that on both of our channels in the coming weeks. But one of the things he did while I was there was give me a look at some of the upcoming lunar cards, and I can no longer ignore this element. So, let's at least work with what we've got right now, presenting Drakking.
Your Majesty.
So here's the list. As always, I'll give you a background about the archetype, a little bit of a discussion about what I hope the deck can do, and of course, the card by card. But first, if you've been compelled to casting by my videos, I have great news for me! I've got an affiliate code for the Elestrals shop, so if you intend to pick up cardboard or plushies, please use that code and get me some cash. With that, let's do Drakking. Last month's Shattered Stars blew us away by releasing some of the first lunar Elestrals way before Moonrise. These cards are legal October 1st, which is a couple of days away, so we're going to have to assess their playability. Nobby and Fawnlet are crazy strong, but they're currently missing their Ascension forms. Keep in mind these guys are good enough that I expect as long as those cards have text on them, they're going to be playable. Artemis is okay, but clearly meant to synergize with cards that don't yet exist. But Drakking's all the way here. Drakid is a decent lunar Elestral. It almost always wins combat with an attack position Elestral, but its payoff is how it synergizes with Rock in a Hard Place. Like format staple Edward, it has a specific Ascension if Rock in a Hard Place is cast while it's on the field. Drakking, that Ascension, is Goyo Guardian with upside. That's crazy, right? It reborns the Elestrals it destroys, it can't be attacked while one of them is on field, and it's got a massive 7 attack stat. It's also got an insane matchup versus the existing Rune lineup. Native immunity to Tsunami and Dense Fog. A Gorgon's just sort of trades for a battle step. A Laurel's isn't ever online because the reborn Elestral will have fewer spirits. And Shield for 3 is fine. I should mention there are a ton of ways to play this guy. I've seen Tadpuff, I've seen All-Ins playing 3 just trying to raw ascend over a Spectress. You've got room to play. We're going to try out the most basic strategy I can imagine, basically just 5s playing 3 Rock and the Ascensions. So with that, let's get into the card by card. First up, let me introduce you to my main man, Edward. Of course, this card is natively very good, but if a player casts Rock in a Hard Place, we'll special ascend into a Curibus from hand or deck. We're playing 1 Curibus, though we can't usually trigger its effect. It does have 9 attack and 2 spirits attached to it. We're playing 3 Rabbit because I have a sickness I cannot cure, 3 Spectress as our beater of choice, and then 3 copies of Drakid, who can target a 1-spirit Elestral, exchange its base attack with this Drakid's base attack until the end phase, and can special ascend into Drakking from your hand or deck when you activate a Rock in a Hard Place. Now, this is fine. It means that if your opponent has an Elestral with some amount of attack points in attack, you can swap them, and it enables this card to get over really big guys, even Ascension forms, but it doesn't get over defense position Elestrals, which is a real problem because we no longer have any convincing outs to Astrabbit. Here's one, however. We're playing 1 copy of Drakking. Of course, when it destroys an Elestral in battle, it can be special cast with only Lunar and Water Spirits, so use those sparingly, and when it's on your field, this Drakking can't be attacked. We're also playing Smoltuga. I just needed something else to fill out the remaining slots, ideally an Elestral, and this card has been way overperforming for me of late, so we're playing 1 Nekruff as well. Now, when we're playing Nekruff, you consider playing 1 copy of a Vipyro in your Spirit deck, and if we're playing 1 Vipyro, it's not too big to play 2, and just also shove in Lavalith. You can see that my brain is completely addled by the ban list. For more of a reference on that, I'm still playing the Earthquake. I think unconditional removal is still extremely strong and worth splashing 2 copies of Taratlus, but this deck's spirit math is not fantastic, so I may be talking out of my ass here. We're playing 3 copies of Rock in a Hard Place. Of course, this can't be chained to by a counter rune. You target a rune and an Elestral on an opponent's field, and then the opponent destroys 1 of them. This feels bad because you never really want your opponent to be able to make a decision, but it feels good because you get a sense of which one is more threatening. Your opponent is also always going to pick the Elestral, because now that you can cast this with Drakid on your side of the field, you can get into a position really easily where, like, their Elestral existing is a huge liability for you. So it's sort of Earthquake. If you squint, we're playing 3 Tsunami and then 3 Ambrosia, 2 Nectar of the Gods. We are a combo deck. We want to see more cards. 1 Resting on Your Laurels, 3 Gorgon's Gaze, 3 PTA, and 3 Shield of Achilles. We're doing a little bit of boy math here. 2 Terratlas for our 1 copy of Earthquake, 1 Vipyro for our Lavalith, and occasionally our Necrough. We're playing 9 Leviathan, which is not very many. Moving on, we've got 5 copies of Owloon. I think this could be bumped to 6. You want to have enough that you can do the combo and then also retain some number of lunar and water spirits for Drakking. You'd prefer water because then they play around Tsunami, but also sometimes a lunar enchanted Elestral it gets over is really good. So maybe could be bumped 1 additional, but I have no idea what I'd take out. And 2 Zaptor for the 3 Astrabbit. So with that, let's jump into a game. Our match is going to be up against Rhinosect. Big day for Rhinosect. Obviously, being the deck that still has removal after all the removal gets hit is a great position to be in. We have an okay grip here. We've got a Smoltuga, a Spectaris, a Resting, a Gorgons, and a Curubus. Sucks to see the Curubus in hand, but the thing about these Ascension Elestrals is now that all of the spot removal's gone, it's actually kind of nice to just have something threatening in your grip that you can potentially go in on at any given point. Our opponent's going to go for the Astrabbit lead, which is way scarier in the face of 0 PTA because it's not like you can just Earthquake it on the crackback. Theoretically, we could ascend into the Curubus here, but I think it's a little early to develop a card like that. Like, that's a card I want to come down when my opponent has exhausted their options. So we're just going to expend a draw. I always feel comfortable expending to draw in decks that have these small synergies like Rock and Hard Place and Drakking. We want to find both halves of it. Our opponent's going to go for a Narpoon here. We let that go. I'm just kind of holding out hope for Morfrost, but they add Rhinymph, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, I guess there's a good deck coming. They're going to go for the Cryoblast on our Smoltuga. This is a great card differential for us, I feel. Our opponent's spent a Cryoblast to get rid of a Smoltuga, which already has traded for 1 card in the Necrough in hand, and they're about to put themselves in a position where this Resting on Your Laurels can be our out to the Astrabbit. We don't have to commit to something like a Curubus. So they're going to pass back to us, and ooh, a Drakid. And that's something to keep in mind because it means that if our opponent ever commits to an attack position Elestral with a lot of stats on it, we can get it out of the way. We're going to go ahead and fire off that copy of Resting, and with no back row, I feel pretty comfortable going for Water Puppy here, threatening the Curubus for next turn, just on the off chance. Our opponent's going to draw, and they are going to think for a little bit. Really hard to contest this attack position Necrough, especially when it's a Water Puppy, but Rhinymph will do the job. They're going to go for it here. They'll go Rhinymph. They'll do the Rhinymph effect in order to change it to an artifact empowering the Necrough, and then what do you know? There's a guy who can be cast from the hand as a special if you have an artifact in your rune row that it used to be an Elestral. So they'll use the ignition effect of the Rhinosect and pop the Necrough here, sending the Rhinymph to the graveyard as well. We will shield this. Kind of rough position to be in just because, like, Drakking doesn't trade for it because they put the words 1 Spirit Elestral on this, and as a result, it wouldn't have been able to use its effect to swap attack stats. Still happy to develop these Spectaris here. And now we're getting into a position where we have to start making really good use of our Spirit deck. Momentarily, we're going to have to give up on either Earthquake or Lavalith, and I do not look forward to that. Our opponent's going to drop an Ambro here, get a couple of cards back. I imagine they have at least 1 Ambro in grip just because they're not committing to the rune row yet. Speaking of, they have another Rhinymph. They're going to try and use the effect again, targeting our Spectaris. We will go ahead and Gorgons this. We know they have the Rhinosect in hand, so there's really no reason to pretend like they might not play it. They are going to set 1 here, which is a little frightening, and they'll set an additional 1 as well. We'll go ahead and draw. Oh, it's a Nog. That's great news. I'm going to give up on the Lavalith. We'll draw a couple of cards, and Rock and Hard Place is exactly what we're looking for. We'll go Drakking correctly enchanted here, and then we're going to fire off the Rock and Hard Place with our last remaining Lunar. Oh my god, that's spirit math. We'll target the Rhinymph and the card behind it. They go ahead and send the Rhinymph to the graveyard, which is frustrating, but also pretty understandable. Like, one of the weird nombos in this deck is if you give your opponent the option to keep an Elestral on field right before Drakking comes out, they're never going to take it, right? Because then you could just steal it. So they're almost always going to go for the rune row. That's fine, though, because it means we're going to be able to hit for 3, which we'll do right here. We'll try and bring them down to 9, and they're going to draw for a turn. I imagine there's no shield, because that would be a decent shield on the Drakking. They draw for a turn and think about it a little bit. They are way up ahead on us on spirits. They're going to take a turn to expend to draw. They're going to set 1 more card, and we have to push the advantage because they ambroed and we didn't. I'm going to push the advantage with the stupidest play I can imagine, which is attack position Astrabbit Water Enchanted. Threatens the Curubus for a future turn, and for now, it is 1 attack that plays under Tsunami. So we're going to do that and try and hit for 4, putting them at 4 to our 3. Again, we are bleeding spirits here. Rock and Hard Place cost 2, but still in complete control of the board and playing around laurels as best we can. Our opponent has another Ambrosia, so they're going to use that. They'll go back up to 6, I believe, at which point we are really sweating, I'm not going to lie. They will think for a little bit about exactly how they want to do this turn. It is a hard one. Committing to the board into a Drakking is really difficult, but Aeromare is not a bad one, provided that they can do something about the Drakking, so I imagine the card they just set is going to contest that attack specifically. They're going to go for Ambro here. Again, that's all 3 Ambro! 7-2R3. Oh god, this board's got to win the game on its own. So now we actually can develop the Curubis from earlier. I imagine whatever set card our opponent has, it contests the Drakking, so it's going to be like a Gorgons is the best case scenario for us, or maybe like a Shield. So if it is one of those things, going into the Curubis threatens the Aeromare, and then we can put the pressure on with the Spectaris, potentially hitting for a ton of damage the following turn. These 2 rocks in a hard place are doing absolutely nothing for us. We're just going to think about it for a little bit, and then ascend this Astrabbit straight into the Curubis. Of course, the Curubis isn't going to be able to use its effect, but that 9 attack stat is really something. One of the really crazy parts about Curubis is that it just has an incredible stat line. That 2 looks pretty bad, but there's so few ways to change it to defense position, just because the primary way that you change the position of attack position Elestrals is with Tsunami. And of course, this card has a pretty natural immunity. It is Shield, as expected, which means we're going to go for the Curubis over the Aeromare, and they are going to spend a Gorgons, keeping it alive. I guess maybe thinking that they'll like misenchant it into Rhinosect, but that doesn't even contest the Curubis because the attack stat is too high. We'll pass here, and now we have equalized the spirit count. We know one of the cards in our opponent's hand is the Rhinosect. We know they're out of Ambrose, which is pretty good, but if they beat our board, it's going to be really hard to claw back into it. They are going to ascend for the Rhinosect, but unfortunately for them, it is misenchanted at present. They're going to go for the Aeromare, also misenchanted, onto the Rhinosect, I believe. Of course, they're not going to be able to use the Rhinosect to pop the Curubis because it is misenchanted. So they'll think about it for a little bit and I guess just pass back turn. We do not need the cards in our hand, which is great because they don't do anything, but all we have to do here is go to combat. I'm struggling to think of anything that would prevent us from winning this game. God, the Earthquake top deck would be so sexy here. But we will just go ahead and take 1 off the attack into the Spectaris, draw for turn, and it's a Tsunami. All right, let's go for it. And thankfully it connects, which means that our opponent is put on 0 spirits, and they are going to show their hand. We're going to win the game. So we're back with the deck, and Jesus, 3 Ambro? Let's do the pros and cons. First, the pros. 1, these are really good elements to be in. Eddy, Spectaris, and Tsunami are played in so much, and you don't have to do any boy math to get them in. 2, Drakking is just as good as he looks on paper. He threatens a functional victory every single turn, and he's just immune to so much. Lovely. And 3, Rock in a Hard Place. I've come down hard on this card in the past, but I think it is good. As removal has been excised from the game, it serves a pretty good substitute. And the cons. 1, this specific list may be living a little too in the past. The rabbits, the EQ, and definitely the lava lift seem more than a little suspect. You can blunt the blow by expending the earth and fire early, but there's still some really rough spirit counts going on. 2, Curubis feels kind of wasted in this strategy. You never really get to activate that second effect. He's often just a big guy. That's fine, but it's not fantastic. And 3, it's a rough sell post board. Every opponent is going to have between 3 and 6 cards to slot out against you every time, meaning you're going to be up against really targeted answers as soon as Game 2 starts. All in all, I expect Drakking to make a splash when it comes to this upcoming format. Maybe not in this list exactly, but somewhere for sure.